This video will follow the setting up section of the 112 pp user guide. We will cover use of the three-way valves, how to replace the cannulas, and how to line up the cannulas to match. Both the P1 and the P2 three-way valves both function the same. Whichever direction the valve is pointing will be closed. Therefore, in this instance, flow coming from the interface will go directly into the chamber, while the open port is closed. If you wish to close off the chamber, you would turn the valve towards the chamber, and now both of these sides will be open while the chamber is protected. If you turn both valves towards the chamber will now be closed off and your mounted tissue is protected. Be careful when moving your chamber around. If you bump the metal ports on the three-way valves, you can break the internal seal and cause a pressure leak. If you have a broken or clogged cannula, you will need to replace it. The process for changing the cannulas does change depending on the side. If you need to replace the right side or P1 cannula, you will simply loosen the plate that holds it in place. You can swing that out of the way and pull the tubing off of the port. After you've removed the P1 tubing and cannula, you will need to separate them so you can replace both parts. You will need to use a ruler so you can match the lengths when replacing these parts. You can see that the tubing is 1.5 centimeters, so we will take that measurement and cut new tubing. You want to be close with your measurements, but they don't have to be the exact same length. You then need to grab a replacement cannula. Line up the cannulas so you can take a measurement. Using your cutting instrument, make a mark so you know the correct length to cut the cannula. Break off the cannula at the mark you just made, and you can discard the old tubing and the old cannula. You can now take your measured cannula and place it in the tubing, and then replace this in the chamber. You may need to move the fastening plate out of the way so the cannula can fall into place. You may also need to adjust the location of the holder. Tighten the fastening plate back in place. This completes the cannula replacement on the P1 side. The process is very similar on P2, but there are a couple differences. When making adjustments or replacements on the P2 side, you always need to be mindful of the force transducer. Anything connected to this arm can damage the force transducer. Therefore, we need to limit the amount of force used. Start by removing the tubing from the valve on the bottom of the 112 chamber. You will then loosen the screw on top of the arm from the force transducer. Now carefully remove this mount. Now the process is very similar to P1. You will loosen this fastening plate, which will expose the tubing and the cannula. You can then replace both sections. It's also a good idea to replace this additional section of tubing at the same time. You can now replace the P2 cannula mount on the transducer arm. You can now secure this mount in place using the screw and replace the tubing on the bottom valve. Lastly, we will cover how to align the cannulas under the microscope. In order to get the most accurate cannula alignment, perform these adjustments under the dissection microscope. You can start by focusing your view on the P2 cannula, as this is fixed in place on the force transducer. You can then adjust the y-axis of the P1 cannula so that it appears to be in line with the P2 cannula. Then move the cannulas so their tips are close together. Do make sure that you do not run the cannula tips into one another, as this will break the cannulas and they will have to be replaced. Ensure that the P2 cannula tip is in focus. Then raise or lower the P1 cannula so that each tip is in focus at the same focal plane. After the cannulas appear to be in line, you should increase the magnification and check one final time. For more information on the 112 pp, please refer to the DMT website or additional training videos.